So do you mind telling us name, pronouns, and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chay Brown. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a trans man with mental health difficulties, and I'm probably not neurotypical. I'm director of operations and director for healthcare at Transactual and co-founder, so that takes most of my time. And yeah, so very, very passionate about talking about how we all as a community think about people's intersecting identities and how we make sure everyone can feel part of our community.
How do your intersecting identities influence or impact your sense of belonging in the wider LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, so I'm a trans man, I'm a gay man, I'm white, and because of being a man, because of being relatively cis-passing, for want of a better way of phrasing it, because of my whiteness, I have a lot of privilege in the community. Because my disability is hidden, I have a lot of privilege compared to perhaps other trans people within the community, other disabled people within the community. I think one of the things, though, sort of was having to. I'd grown up in the LGBTQ plus community, but one of the things was about learning the real subtleties of the sort of non-verbal communication that can go on between gay men in certain contexts, and that was a sort of learning thing for me, and sort of something that I had to get over my anxiety about, and sort of learning to read. Trying to read people's intentions when the communication is not necessarily verbal, and people not being direct about things could be quite tricky for me sometimes.
So in your experiences, what are the most significant challenges faced by disabled people within the LGBTQ plus community? So here, like I said, you may want to think about a side of accessibility, which is probably like one of the top things. What else is there that prevents disabled people from feeling fully included in the wider LGBTQ plus community?
I think, well, there's so many things. So, when we talk about accessibility, there's obviously things like wheelchair access, or, having step-free access. And then, even some of the venues in London that have step-free access, some of them don't have accessible toilet facilities. So, I've got friends that can't engage in a lot of LGBTQ plus events, because even if they manage to get public transport there, which is a challenge in itself if they're a wheelchair user, it's then, you're going to a venue where you can't use the toilet, and they're sort of like, go to the restaurant across the road. And, I've got a friend that when he goes to a certain night out, he'll take a pint pot outside and go in the pint pot, which is, you shouldn't feel the need to do that. And as well, sort of thinking about the trans community, and the sort of number of people in the trans community that might have find certain sensory experiences difficult, when the community events are all based around sort of loud, bustling, sort of alcohol related a lot of the time, venues, that can be really challenging for people. And like I'd mentioned sort of about myself, sort of learning for trans people that are perhaps, come out and you might perhaps be new to the LGBTQ plus community. If you struggle with social situations, either through anxiety or, because you're autistic, sort of learning the sort of unspoken codes of behaviour, ways of communication, understanding how things work is really challenging, and it can add to people's anxiety as well.
How can the wider LGBTQ plus community work better to dismantle discrimination towards minority groups, foster more inclusive environments, and promote empowerment for intersectional communities?
So I think if it's a venue, it's a social venue, or someone that's putting on an event, think accessibility, and yes, I mentioned in my other answer about wheelchair access and step-free access, but that's not the start and end of accessibility. You're thinking about, are you going to make BSL interpreters available at your events? Are you offering closed captioning on online events? Are you asking people what their access needs are if it's an event where they're booking tickets? Are you providing quiet spaces? A really good example, actually, I went to a trade union LGBTQ plus conference, and they had social events in the evenings, but they'd already got people's access requirements. They had a disco, but also a room for board games, for example. They checked out the venue to make sure it was accessible in terms of mobility, and they'd really thought about it. And the reason they'd put so much thought about it was, number one, because they're person-centred, but also because the people on the organising committee understood accessibility, and a lot of that was coming from lived experience. So it's to do with listening to disabled people and asking people, what is it? And being willing to be told, actually, you could have done this better. And putting it in your budget, always budget for it. If you end up not needing all of your accessibility budget, you can save it for the next project, or you can use it on something else that's going to benefit disabled LGBTQ plus people.
So true, so true. And I just quickly, I what people don't understand a lot of the times, they fail to understand, is that if things are accessible for disabled people, they're going to be accessible for everyone, and they're going to be enjoyable for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you share any experience about? Can you share any experiences about empowerment linked to your intersectional identities that you want the wider LGBTQ plus community to know?
So thinking about my mental health, and that I probably am not neurotypical. I was sort of slowly realised over time, and part of the reason that I feel so comfortable to talk about it is because I've heard other people talking about it. So I know that I'm not the only, person, certainly not in the trans community, but I'm not the only person in the LGBTQ plus community. There are a lot of us that experience mental health difficulties, partly because of how we're treated by society, but for lots of reasons. There's a lot of us who are not neurotypical. And that's cool. It doesn't matter why there's so many of us. We just are. We're here. That's okay. And I think, being comfy to talk about that's really important, because it's showing people that they're not alone, that they can find acceptance with, they can find community. And that's what I love about Power Pride as well. It's sort of bringing the visibility, bringing the inclusion, and spreading sort of the words in the community and beyond that inclusion first approaches are just the right thing to do. Because in my mind, for me, at Transactual, we're working for the trans community. If we're not working for disabled trans people, we're not working for the trans community, because we're missing people out.